Welcome back to the Ancestral Findings podcast. A death certificate can tell you when and where your ancestor died. An obituary might name surviving relatives and tell you where the funeral was held. But what if the death was sudden, accidental, unexplained, or suspicious? What if the death certificate gives you only a few words about what happened, but leaves you with more questions than answers? There may be another record waiting for you. Coroner's inquest records were created when officials needed to determine how or why someone died. Depending on the time and place, an inquest file might contain only a few pages. In other cases, it can include witness statements, testimony from relatives, medical findings, descriptions of the scene, photographs, drawings, letters, or other evidence. For a family historian, those records can reveal far more than a cause of death. They may tell you where your ancestor was living, who was with that person during the final hours of life, who identified the body, which relatives lived nearby, what kind of work the person did, and how other people described their relationship to the deceased. And sometimes, one witness statement can lead you into an entirely new branch of your research. In this episode, we're going to look at why a coroner might have investigated your ancestor's death, what you may find inside an inquest file, where those records can be found today, and how to use the people, places, and details in the file to continue your genealogy research. If you have an ancestor whose death has never been completely explained, this is one record group you may want to go back and check. Not every death resulted in a coroner's investigation. The rules varied from one place to another and changed over time, but coroners commonly became involved when a death was sudden, violent, accidental, suspicious, or simply unclear. A drowning could result in an inquest. So could a workplace accident, railroad accident, fire, fall, shooting, poisoning, suspected suicide, homicide, or an unexpected death when no physician had been attending the person. An unidentified body could also lead to an investigation. Historically, the coroner wasn't simply recording that someone had died. The purpose was to determine what had happened. In many places, a coroner worked with a jury that heard testimony and reached a finding concerning the cause and circumstances of the death, and that process created paperwork. For us, generations later, that paperwork can be extremely useful. There was no single inquest form used everywhere, so the contents of a file can vary considerably. You may find the deceased person's name, age, residence, occupation, date, and place of death, and the official finding concerning how the death occurred. But that may be only the beginning. Some files contain sworn statements from people who knew the deceased or witnessed what happened. Those witnesses might include a spouse, parent, sibling, neighbor, employer, co-worker, doctor, police officer, or someone who simply happened to be nearby. And this is where you need to slow down and read carefully. A relative might explain when the deceased moved into the area. An employer could mention how long your ancestor had worked there. A neighbor might name a spouse, child, brother, or sister. Someone who identified the body may explain exactly how he or she knew the person. None of this information was being collected for genealogy. Officials were trying to understand a death. But because they were asking questions about the deceased, the answers sometimes preserve pieces of family history that never appeared in a census, marriage record, or death certificate. One of the most unusual things about a coroner's inquest is that it can tell you something about the final hours of an ancestor's life. Most genealogy records give us isolated facts. A census tells us where someone was living on one particular day. A marriage record tells us when two people married. A death certificate records the end of a life. An inquest can sometimes tell you what was happening around the person. Witnesses might describe where your ancestor had been that day, who was present, what the person was doing, where he or she was going, or when someone last saw the person alive. If the death happened at work, testimony may describe the job and workplace. If your ancestor died while traveling, the file may identify traveling companions or explain why the person was in that location. If the death occurred at someone else's house, the testimony may identify whose home it was and why your ancestor was there. For someone whose life you normally know through names, dates, and census entries, that can provide a very different kind of record. Now, when you find an inquest, don't concentrate only on the deceased. Pay attention to every witness. The witnesses may provide some of the best clues in the entire file. Write down every name you find, then look at how each person knew your ancestor. A witness may identify himself as a brother-in-law. That gives you a relationship to investigate. Someone might say she had known your ancestor since childhood. That could point you toward an earlier community. A coworker may say your ancestor had recently arrived from another state. A neighbor might mention relatives you haven't found anywhere else. Even someone who wasn't related can help establish where your ancestor lived, worked, traveled, or spent time. This is one of those situations where genealogy becomes more productive, when we stop searching only for the same ancestor and begin researching the people around that person. If 5 witnesses are named in the file, research those 5 people. Look for them in the census. Look at where they lived. See whether any of them appear in your family's other records. You may discover that a witness who seemed unimportant at first was actually connected to the family. Some inquests present another problem. Officials didn't always know who the deceased person was. When a body couldn't immediately be identified, investigators had to look for clues. A file might describe clothing, jewelry, papers, letters, personal belongings, physical characteristics, or other things found with the person. Witnesses might later be called to make an identification. A relative or acquaintance could explain where the deceased came from, where the person had been staying, or who belonged to the family. That can be especially useful when an ancestor died away from home or when you're trying to distinguish between 2 people with similar names. If you think an unidentified or partly identified person might be your ancestor, don't rely on the name alone. Compare the age. Compare the residence. Look at the occupation. Look at the relatives. Compare the location and anything else you can find with what you already know. And once you find a coroner's file, let it take you somewhere else. A good genealogy record often points to another record, and inquest files can do that very well. If officials believed a crime had occurred, look for court records. There may be indictments, criminal case files, trial records, jail registers, or prison records. If the death involved a workplace accident, search newspapers and find out whether records from the employer survive. If your ancestor died in a railroad accident, search beyond the local newspaper. The event may have been reported in other towns, especially if the person worked for the railroad or the accident interrupted service. If the deceased wasn't identified immediately, newspapers may have published a description while officials tried to locate relatives. A probate file may have been opened afterward, particularly if the person owned property or left minor children. Funeral home records, cemetery records, church records, and burial permits may help you follow what happened after the coroner's investigation ended. The inquest may be only the center of a much larger group of records. Newspapers are especially useful once you know that a coroner became involved. Don't search only the date of death. Start a few days before it and continue for several weeks afterward. The first newspaper story may have been written before officials knew exactly what had happened. A later article might describe the inquest. Another could name witnesses or report the official finding. If there was a criminal investigation, the story could continue for months. Try different spellings of your ancestor's name. Search the place where the death occurred. Try the employer's name if the death happened at work. If a railroad or company was involved, search its name as well. And once you know the names of witnesses, search for them too. Sometimes the newspaper explains something you found in the inquest. Other times, the inquest gives you the name, location, or event you need in order to find the newspaper article. The 2 records can work together, so where do you find coroner's inquest records today? There isn't one national collection where you can search every historical inquest. These were generally local records, and where they ended up depends heavily on the county and state. Start with the place where the death occurred. That's important. Your ancestor may have lived in one county and died in another. The investigation would usually be connected with the place where the death happened. Check the county archives, courthouse, historical society, public library, genealogical society, and state archives. When you search online catalogs, try several different terms. Search for coroner records, coroner's inquests, coroner's reports, inquest records, coroner case files, and death investigations. Add the county or city name. Some state and local archives have placed indexes or entire collections online. Missouri, for example, has a searchable coroner's inquest database through the Missouri State Archives. The Library of Virginia has digitized historical coroners' inquisitions from its local government collections. Other records are still available only on microfilm or in the original papers. That's why you shouldn't assume a record is gone, simply because Google, Ancestry, or Family Search doesn't bring it up when you enter your ancestor's name. Search for the collection, not only the person. That distinction can make a big difference. A coroner's collection may have been digitized, without every name inside every file being indexed. Your ancestor may be the deceased person and appear in the database, but a spouse, brother, sister, neighbor, or other relative may appear only several pages into a witness statement. If you search only that relative's name, you may never find the document. Once you locate an inquest, read the whole file. Don't stop when you find the official cause of death. Read every statement. Look at the signatures. Notice addresses. Write down occupations, record the names of witnesses and officials, pay attention to references to letters, photographs, diagrams, or other exhibits. If something is mentioned but isn't included with the digital copy, contact the repository and ask whether the original material survives. The page that looks least important at first may contain the clue you need. You should also remember who created these records and why. An inquest shouldn't automatically be treated as a perfectly accurate account of everything that happened. Witnesses could disagree. Someone may have misunderstood what he or she saw. An age, birthplace, or relationship could be given incorrectly. Officials were working with the information available to them at the time. If several witnesses give different versions of an event, don't simply choose the one you prefer. Compare the testimony with other records. Ask who provided each piece of information and how that person would have known it. Then see whether another source supports it. That's the same kind of source evaluation we should be doing throughout our genealogy research. There's also something else to know before you request a coroner's file. Some of the material can be difficult to read. These records were created to investigate deaths, and they can include detailed descriptions of injuries, accidents, violence, or the condition of a body. Photographs may survive as well. You don't have to study every graphic detail to use the file for genealogy. Concentrate on the information that helps you understand the person, the family, the relationships, the locations, and the events surrounding the death. But knowing what may be in the file before you open it can help you decide how you want to approach the material. And that brings us back to why coroner's inquest records are so useful. Officials were asking questions. Who was this person? What happened? Who saw it? Where did the person live? Who knew the deceased? Who were the relatives? Those questions sometimes produced answers that never appeared anywhere else. So here's a practical way to use this in your research today. Go through your family tree and look for an ancestor who died suddenly, accidentally, violently, or under circumstances you've never completely understood. Maybe the death certificate uses a vague phrase. Maybe a newspaper clipping mentions an accident but doesn't explain much. Maybe the person died away from home. Maybe there's simply something about the death that has always left you wondering. Start with the county where the death occurred. Find out whether a coroner or medical examiner would have been involved at that time. Then search the county archive, courthouse catalog, state archive, family search catalog, historical society, and local library. Search for the record group itself, not only the ancestor's name. And if you find the file, don't read it simply to discover how your ancestor died. Read it as a genealogist. Who are the witnesses? Where do they live? How do they know your ancestor? What occupations are mentioned? What relatives appear? What locations are named? What other records does the investigation point toward? Then follow every one of those clues. That may lead you into newspapers, probate files, court cases, cemetery records, funeral home records, employment records, or another branch of the family. A coroner's inquest was created because someone needed answers about a death. Generations later, those same records may give you answers about a life. They may help you understand where your ancestor was, who surrounded that person, what was happening in the family, and where you should search next. And sometimes, that is exactly what good genealogy research needs. Not another search for the same name, a new record, a new group of people, and a new trail to follow. If you've got a hard-to-find ancestor you're stuck on, I'd love to hear about it. Just head over to ancestralfindings.com and click on Contact to send me a message. While you're there, take advantage of our free weekly genealogy lookups, explore thousands of articles, and enjoy hundreds of podcast episodes. We've been helping family history researchers since 1995. And if you're looking for even more, check out our Genealogy Gold Q&A series over on Patreon. Thanks for listening, and as always, happy searching.